Welcome, everyone, to the captive audience. It is the 20th of August. And as we hurtle through the election year, I'm Kevin Hoare, and I am here with Representative Ed Deal, uh, probably one of the most knowledgeable single people on all the issues that are affecting our state.
Besides you, Kevin, of course.
Well, I'm informed because I talk to you. But I think that you do a lot of things to inform people through social media, through the things that you write and put on Oregon Catalyst and elsewhere. And every time I turn around, if there's an important issue that people are all starting to talk about, you're about 3 steps ahead of them writing something about it so that they can catch up. And we have several of those issues today. But thank you for joining me here today, and thank you for being on.
Absolutely. You bet. Good to be back with you, Kevin.
So, by the way, you have a race yourself, but it's not one of the closer races, I guess, for the state house, as I recall. No one ever takes it for granted, but
No, never take it for granted. But I do have an opponent this time. My last go around, I didn't have a general election opponent, but I do this time. So,
well, I have high confidence in you that that's all going to go swimmingly well. And actually, that you are speaking about the issues that people all over the state care about, as well as your district. And one of them is actually something that's going to be concurrently on the ballot this fall. It was called IP17, and then I guess they got enough signatures and got given a measure number, and is now called Measure 118. If I have that correctly. And Measure 118 is going to impose, if I understand it correctly, a 3% tax on sales of any company in Oregon with $25 million or more in sales. And so it's going to have a really catastrophic effect on certain businesses, particularly like grocery stores and things like that. And so there's a mounting opposition to this. What do we need to know about this? And what can we tell people who don't know anything?
Yeah, this is a 3% tax on top of all the existing taxes we have.
Yeah.
And so the idea is they tax businesses in Oregon 3% on sales, whether they're making 1% of profit or 10%, they're being taxed 3%.
Yeah.
The idea is that money is redistributed. They call it the Oregon rebate. So the idea is that money would be given to, distributed to every man, woman, and child in Oregon equally. So
yeah.
It's kind of a universal basic income approach. So tax businesses and then hand out free money, but nothing's free. We know that. The latest estimate, originally, they've been telling everybody it amounts to $750 per person. The latest estimate that we have, and I think it came from the state's fiscal office, is $1,600 per person. It would be the single largest tax increase in Oregon history. I think it's about $6.8 billion.
And it's just straight up socialist income redistribution.
Yeah,
and are they allowed in the ballot measure language to call it a rebate? Because as I understand it, rebates are when you get your own money back. This is taking other people's money and giving it to a different group. So shouldn't that technically be illegal to call it by a false name and then send that in the description out to voters? Maybe they can say whatever they want on their advertising, right? But I wonder if the ballot title actually...
I'd have to look at the ballot again. I don't think it says that in the ballot. I think that's their term for it. The initiative petition, they had two of them, Oregon Rebate 1 and Oregon Rebate 2. So, but I don't think the ballot title calls it that.
Does it?
Yeah.
They might have noticed the legal difficulty that would present. But lying is lying, by the way. And they have a couple, the Oregon Catalyst pointed out that there's a couple of lies that they are putting as part of their efforts to promote it. One is it says it's going to have more cash in your pocket and therefore boost local businesses in the economy. But when you when you do this for everybody, what happens to prices?
Yeah, everything gets more expensive, and so the estimate's like 1 to 2% increase in prices because
So it's plus whatever, minus whatever, and
we got to remember every time if I make a product and I sell it to an Oregon company and they combine it into their product and they sell it to another Oregon company, every one of those transactions is a sale that gets 3% added onto it. So by the time it gets to the consumer, it's a pretty substantial tax hit. Here's a fascinating thing about this one, Kevin, is it's very rare for Republicans and Democrats and business owners and unions to agree on anything. They all agree. They all agree this is a bad bill or a bad ballot measure. It's a hot mess for a lot of the same reasons, but some different reasons. One of the things that concerns a lot of the labor unions, even the Oregon Department of Education has not formally come out with their announcement, but they are soon. They're opposed to this. One of the biggest problems is because of the way the ballot measure is structured, it's a tax on top of a tax. It's a sales tax. It reduces the money going into the general fund by, I still haven't got the firm number on this, but I've heard $500 million. I've heard $2.5 billion. So what that means is we're adding this massive tax that'll go out to people in the form of this UBI, but then the state loses revenue that goes for basic services. So that has to be made up somewhere.
So the money's not taxable either when it goes to people?
Well, no, it's not. And there's this convoluted math that if you're already on Social Security benefits or you're already getting benefits, there's some offset. It's complicated. It's poorly written. There's another thing too, Kevin. This is 95% funded by out-of-staters.
The whole campaign. California and New York is what you said in your Twitter post.
And the bulk of it is coming from one guy down in California. One rich guy thinks he can run a grand experiment up here in Oregon, where the social progressive socialist idea lab rats, and it's Measure 110 all over again on that front.
Yeah, that's what happened with Measure 110, right? That was an experiment, and it clearly has failed.
It was a catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty good that it's a matter of getting the word out when you have Democrats, Republicans, all publicly speaking out against it. The governor speaks out against it. The unions, public unions, labor unions, business owners. That's a really good sign. Even there's a tax association that I'm trying to remember the name of here, who is kind of Tax Fairness Oregon. Okay, Tax Fairness Oregon quite often disagrees with Oregon business and industry.
Right.
They're for higher taxes. They're for a different tax structure. They also understand that this one's a hot mess. So I think it's a matter of getting the word out to people to let them know what a disaster this is, and it will be voted down.
Well, and it looks like the campaign against Measure 118, and by the way, folks want to get more info, they can go to noonmeasure118.com and get information. I saw that in your Twitter post, but the campaign against Measure 118 has pulled in about $5.8 million, which in Oregon terms is actually a very significant number for any campaign, especially at this stage.
Yeah.
And the main contributors are grocery stores, not grocery, retail grocery political action committees and grocers, large groceries, because they operate on what 1 to 3% profit margin. And this is a tax on sales that would literally take profitable grocery stores and either cause them to lose money, or, as is often done, because a long time ago I learned the statement: corporations don't pay taxes; they collect taxes. That's all they do.
Yeah.
They are pass-through entities because they don't destroy or punish themselves and become less profitable and less competitive simply because someone puts a tax on them. They just pass it on to their customers. And in the case of grocery stores, that's you and I and everybody that buys food, which means that instant 3% inflation has to happen, or they go under, or they close stores and they leave, which was already starting to happen with some areas because of the crime problems.
Kevin, I've learned from Vice President Harris that 1% profit is price gouging.
Yeah, so, that's right.
Implementing price controls now.
Yeah, the government's so good at making all those decisions about everyone's everyday lives. They have no self-interest. They're a bunch of angels that simply grant their wisdom to us and tell I learned something actually about price controls. Was down in Eugene, knocking doors, talking with voters, and one guy comes up and he says, "I remember when I was working at a TV store selling TVs.
Yeah.
And when during the Nixon administration, when they tried the ill-fated effort of wage and price controls to tamp down inflation during the Arab-Israeli war and oil embargo, so they tried to tamp it down. It was also after they left the gold standard and Bretton Woods and all that. And what happened was he said that you had to fill out all this paperwork to certify that you weren't raising prices. And it became so bureaucratic that it effectively made it so they could no longer have any sales, because then they would have to explain when the prices were higher because something wasn't on sale versus when something was. So it killed off all sales. It kept all prices higher, because just because they tell you can't raise prices doesn't mean you can afford to not charge enough for the products.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, of course, we know happens when you have wage and price controls is you say, well, you can't raise the price. Well, also, all the way back down the supply chain, people just stop producing stuff. They're like, I don't need to produce. I can't make any money on it. So I'm not going to produce more milk. I'm not going to produce more bread. And you just end up with running stockouts.
I just can't believe we're even talking about it on a national level. I mean, it worked out so well for the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Working out great for Venezuela. I guess we should be doing the same thing. It's baffling to me. But
well, the only place you could buy anything in the Soviet Union and in many of these countries that start controlling prices is on the black market.
Yeah,
where there are no price controls, but that is where you can get gouged essentially. And so you end up taking the legitimate distribution system, which does have regulation and monitoring to a degree that prevents certain things, negative effects on consumers from happening. And you move into the black market where people just desperate to get things like toilet paper have to pay exorbitant rates for it because they've destroyed the regular distribution system, which was efficient and regulated.
Well, my hope is that people still remember Economics 101 and how supply and demand works. And they'll see the nonsense in Measure 118, hopefully the nonsense in Harris's proposal as well.
Yeah, it's funny that these are both happening at the same time, and both are going to be technically on the ballot here this fall, one form or another. And I would add to that what you just said, which is that how unprecedented it is. Here's a list of some of the people who have come out, elected officials who are officially opposing the measure. Oregon House Speaker Julie Fahey, Senate President Rob Wagner, House Majority Leader Ben Bowman, Senate Majority Leader Kathleen Taylor. All Democrats officially released their opposition this past Friday to it. That's in addition to really all Republicans. And then they reported what the chief petitioner, Antonio Gisbert, I don't know who that is, said. Basically, it's they want you to hate giant corporations that are stealing money from you. Even though those corporations do experience competition and also are regulated, but he's just talking about it as if you can just milk those suckers like they're just big fat cows and it has no consequence. If I'm a business and I'm about to reach the $25 million revenue threshold, or I'm in danger of doing that, and I have the ability to leave the state, I'm leaving. And if I'm a company that could come here, but I'm going to be over that $25 million threshold, this is part of my math calculation as to whether I'm coming to Oregon, period.
Well, we just, I've known this for a while, but I just saw an article recently that showed people in the Portland metro area are moving out. And guess who's moving out? The people with the means.
The affluent.
Eroding their tax base. So people with means, business owners, they're not going to put up with this.
Yeah, I think what I saw in that article, it said $77,000 is the average income of people moving into Oregon. The average income of people leaving, Multnomah County, I should say, $105,000.
Yeah, wow. Well, Margaret Thatcher said that socialism's great until you run out of other people's money.
Yeah.
And when I think of that quote, when I think of 118.
That might be the only good thing about 118 is that they'll just cause Oregon to run out of other people's money faster. It's just that what happens after that is really rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is just, it's coming at us nonstop. This is just one horrendous ballot measure. And we've talked about 117 to the ranked choice voting. Yeah. I've been going to different events talking about ranked choice voting. I'll be speaking at one in Yamhill County here in September. I'll be up at an event. I'll be a moderator at an event up in Multnomah County talking ranked choice voting. I'll be doing a virtual debate on that, but there's part of my job, I guess, is to get the word out on these things and share my thoughts and share the facts on them.
Well, and I wanted to ask, what's the latest on that? And what do because I know we've covered it in a previous show and people should go watch that one. I'll provide a link to that because you really covered it very thoroughly, explained it very well. And I know those are some of the things that you're doing when you go around to these groups and you moderate and you present. And of course, we're always looking for more clever ways to explain these things. And ranked choice voting, I think I tell you that I thought ranked choice voting is the measure 110 of our election system.
Yeah,
that might be a shortcut. I don't know. What else? What's the latest? And where can people go if they just want to learn about it or send something to someone and just to read?
Yes, that's a great. NoRankedVoting.com.
NoRankedVoting.com.
This is an Oregon-specific website that has a lot of good facts about ranked choice voting.
Great.
And the great thing is, too, since you and I talked, I've connected with some other folks. I want people to know this isn't a Republican versus Democrat issue, even though the vote on referring the measure to the voters was very much on partisan lines, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are on the other side of the aisle that I would call progressives that are also opposed to ranked choice voting. And I've talked to a number of them and they're very informed on the issue. And they have concluded that ranked choice voting, even though they don't like the current system we have, ranked choice voting is not the answer because it comes along with so much other baggage. So people it's dangerous if we present this as Republicans like it or hate it and Democrats love it. That's absolutely not true.
Well, isn't there proof of this too? Because it has been tried in places. I think Oregon would be the first one to try to adopt something like this statewide.
No, Maine has it statewide.
Oh, they do.
Yeah. Alaska has it statewide.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Alaska.
And a gentleman who's actually coming down to Oregon to speak, Philip Izon, he's got a ballot measure, gathered enough signatures to get it repealed
in Alaska. Yeah. Actually,
Yeah.
sorry, I'd forgotten about Alaska. I knew
Yeah.
all about that because that's why the one congressional seat that Alaska has. It's a statewide at large because just the
Mhm.
population of Alaska. That one seat in a state that voted north of 60%, like 65% or 70% or something for President Trump in 2020, somehow has a Democrat representing it as their sole member of Congress. And even though, as you said, um, it need not be a partisan issue, but um, it does show how distorted something can become, and people can lose faith in the election system they thought they were understanding. And it has been tried in different cities around the country. And as I understand it, usually almost all progressive cities are the ones that have tried to adopt it, and they have actually gotten rid of it, haven't they?
Yeah, over 80 jurisdictions have tried it in the United States, and the vast majority of them have repealed it.
And that's progressives
97%
repealing
of
it.
them. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Burlington, Vermont's an example where somebody was elected and they realized there's one fatal flaw with that I believe is a fatal flaw in the system, ranked choice voting, where you can actually harm your preferred candidate's choices by ranking them first, depending on who you rank second and third.
Yeah.
No system, no election system should suffer from that.
Yeah.
But ranked choice voting does. It played out in Burlington, Vermont. It played out in some other places, and they repealed it.
Isn't it also true that if you can end up having people who may not understand the system because it's confusing if they don't actually use all the ranking positions that they're allowed to use, that they could potentially just have their votes effectively discarded in the
Yes.
final analysis, and those people that are most likely to have that happen are actually the people that we hear all day long Democrats say are hurt, they say, by our current system and could be disenfranchised, like minority voters.
Yeah. They call it ballot exhaustion. And so if you only marked one candidate and that candidate ranked at the bottom of the three or more choices, your ballot is now exhausted. It's set to the side. And then the second and third rounds continue without your input. It's like having a runoff election without having the opportunity to participate in it.
Yeah.
There's a good argument that ranked choice voting goes against the Equal Protection Clause, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights in the Oregon Constitution because of that.
Wow.
The other thing
Go ahead.
No, and you're right that the studies show that ranked choice voting is more prone to mistakes that disqualify ballots. So you can exhaust a ballot because you didn't fill it out correctly. There's more ways to fill it out right. There's also more ways to fill it out wrong. A recent election in New York City had 15% of the ballots exhausted, either due to errors or, they only filled out the first or second round of candidates. 15%, 140,000 voters didn't participate in the last rounds of the election. That's a disaster.
That's terrible. And that's actually enough to change the outcome of any race.
And it does not, ranked choice voting the evidence doesn't show that it increases voter participation.
Right.
Doesn't increase voter confidence. It takes control away from the state, from the county.
Yeah, the local control.
Because they have to defer the final count. You don't just send up your county tallies to the state and the state tallies up all the sums all the counties up. The state actually has to do the count if it goes past the first round, because they have to look at all the counties as a whole to figure out the ranked choice voting area. The other thing I learned since we last talked is state law Current state law says that votes have to be counted at the precinct level. And that's what counties do right now. They divvy it up by precinct. They count up the ballots by precinct. I've been to the Marion County elections office. They have a little bin for every precinct in the county.
Yeah.
They store those ballots there. But anyway, they count them up at the precinct level. They roll that up to the county level. That is impossible with ranked choice voting. It can't be done. It violates state law. Benton County right now with ranked choice voting, the way we are reading state law, they are violating state law.
Yeah.
In the last several years with the ranked choice voting elections. So I don't know. It's just bad on so many fronts.
Well, and it can't be hand counted, right? So like you say, well, got a really close race. We're really concerned, and we want to make sure we construe correctly voter intent on every single ballot that's been voted. Mm-hmm. And you sit down, you do these hand counts eventually, right? And you also have people that are on the side trying to figure out if that's, a dimple or a stray mark, or if that's actually a vote. And you can't actually figure out who the winner is without using the machines that have to help you figure out the whole math of everything, right? So this even takes it one step further away from humans, and potentially, obviously, away from local control, and away from where you could say this election seems to match up with what makes sense in that locale, and we can verify it physically with human eyeballs and oversight by hand. And now maybe you can't do that at all. If that's
it's very difficult to do a hand count, and meaning it would never be done. It would
take forever. Yeah.
And the other thing that goes away. How do you do an audit? How do you do a audit at a precinct level or a county level?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do that. Because again, if it goes beyond the first round, it's all being rolled up to the state. So our ability to just validate, right now, we do simple audits. We'll say, go do a count on this precinct, do it by hand, compare it with what you told us when you sent your results in. That ability to do that kind of a simple audit is gone with ranked choice voting. This whole local control thing is one of the big reasons. And the other example where you can vote for your favorite and actually ruin their opportunity to win. Those two issues are big for the folks that are very interested in election reform. They're not happy with the current system, but they're trying to find another solution. But they look at that with ranked choice voting and they say, no way.
It's adding 4 additional new problems.
Yeah, it is. It's adding more problems that we can't control.
And if you want more voter participation and more faith and trust in the elections, then this is the exact opposite direction to go to achieve those things.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that summary of that. We have, if you've got time, we've got a couple of more topics that we often touch upon when you're on, and it's because you have specific knowledge of these issues, and in particular, we've got our power grid.
Yeah.
We know that at the heart of having a civilization, that looks like what we would call civilization. It's the ability to have electrical power and other alternatives that allow you to heat your home, cool it, cook your food, heat your water. And when you take all those things away, or you make them exorbitantly expensive or unavailable universally, then you really start to see a decline in living standards. You see inflation, which we know has been driven by a lot of this energy costs going up. And of course, those are your public utilities. So when, he's like price gouging, they're the most heavily regulated entities. They actually have to ask permission to increase their prices. But there's a question the Oregon Catalyst asked: is affordable energy, reliable electricity, a thing of the past potentially? And all these rules that are being promulgated by the state that are supposed to apparently change the Earth's temperature at some point, uh, that are being done, are those going to, what kind of effect is that going to have? I put it in a list of articles that I sent to you about new rules for medium and heavy duty vehicles and engines. And so whether it's the, the grid of the future, or the energy sources of the past and present, we are starting to see this become unaffordable, and it's going to really destroy our standard of living, isn't it?
It is. And I got to preface this. Nobody wants to destroy the environment. I live here.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, we
won't
care
do this
about it.
yeah. So, and my kids do, and my kids will. So we want clean air, we want clean water, we want an environment, we want a sustainable earth. But I look at what the investments we make to that should show a return for my quality of life and my
Yeah,
standard of living.
scientifically provable, like it
Yeah.
did this to help.
And
Right.
and a lot of the things we're doing don't demonstrate that. Building out electric car chargers, show me what the return is on that. In huge investment.
Yeah,
Um,
what did they spend? $6 or $7 billion nationally, and they turned around and found out they had built what, 8 car chargers or
yeah,
something
built
insane.
8 car chargers, and they're seeing that consumers aren't interested in electric cars for a lot of I have an electric car, by the way, but I also have a diesel pickup and a gas Jeep, and I
Yeah,
will never get rid of those because there's some places I need to go, uh, and I'm not going to sit around waiting for my car to charge.
yeah,
So I want to make sure that the investments we make show a return to Oregonians. And what we're doing right now, these utility rate hikes, we're looking at what, another 18%?
yeah,
And people are outraged. Well, what's driving that? Legislation is driving that.
yeah.
Regulation is driving that.
Not price gouging, just
No,
the government.
yeah, they have to stay afloat. I get it, but if you're pushing these energy mandates and forcing them to use very expensive energy sources,
Yeah,
that require that are highly distributed, so you've got more wires you need to put up, and then at the same time we're shutting down our forests, so we have more fuel in the forests, and the forests are dry right now. It means
yeah,
they burn. So the utility companies are having to pay lawsuits off because of that, and do these really unrealistic investments due to mandates from the legislature. Those issues are driving up the cost. So what worries me is we go, hey, let's just tell them they can't raise the rates that high, but yet tell them they got to do everything else.
yeah. Do everything, and I don't want to pay for it.
So
And I want it to be reliable, which I think is the other story
yeah,
here, is that they're making it more expensive and forcing less reliable options
well,
that don't work when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine.
exactly. We have no base load power with the way they're designing the system. So if we force them to do these things, you got to pay these lawsuits. You got to do these mandated green energy things that really aren't showing a measurable return to Oregonians. You got to do those, but you can't raise your rates. What gives? Well, regular day-to-day maintenance of the grid gives. Maintenance of power plants gives. Something's got to give. So we're going to end up with even a less reliable system.
Yeah,
So
gutted system.
if you want rates to go down or only go up at a more modest rate, you got to change who's setting the rules, and change who's passing laws in this state. If you want that to happen, that's the only way it's going to happen.
And you got to allow the part of this that is private sector to respond to and have real costs and real, because I know one of the big contentious issues right now is what's being done off the Oregon coast with these wind farms that they're putting in place, and the local residents don't want it. I know
Neither do the fish and the whales. They don't want it either.
That's right. Well, they're just ocean users, according to BOEM. That's what the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, when they came out with their press release, they referred to everybody such as fishermen in the seafood industry, sport fishermen, tourism, and all these as wildlife. They're just ocean users, which just struck me as like, it just dehumanizes all these people, because there is nothing else on the coast besides tourism and fishing. They took away timber to such a great extent that now they're going to go ahead and take the last two legs to the stool and just knock them out from under them. And I know this from the 4th District and the congressional race that's going on there with Monique Despain and Val Hoyle. And it's like, these people are livid. The feedback was overwhelming against it.
Oh, yeah.
Overwhelming. But it's also a giant experiment. That might be the theme for today, is everything seems to be an experiment where they haven't bothered to do preliminary investigations or haven't paid attention to the obvious warning signs that there's a significant chance they're going to do great harm. And then they start putting all of these things out there, doing all this collateral damage, all in the name of an ideology that says they have to go build these windmills, even if people hate them and it does a bunch of harm. They'll industrialize the oceans. And what made me think of this is they're ignoring in the process they subsidize these things with government funds. And on the East Coast, they did that. And then when the government subsidies were over and it was time for these things to just operate as self-standing businesses that could afford to deliver the energy, they lost $6 billion off the coast of New Jersey, and they sent the bill to ratepayers who saw their rates triple.
Yeah. We are setting on a path to build in very deep water. Off the Oregon coast is much different than off the East Coast.
That's right.
Yeah. Near a fault line. This doesn't make any sense. And what burns me up is we have other options. I want clean, reliable, affordable, and plentiful energy. We have other options available that would provide that. We do not have to go and, like you said, industrialize our oceans to make this happen.
And we have an option. We even have a company that you and I know about and actually Monique Despain went and visited. That's how I got to see it, is NuScale, who have innovated in a way that nuclear energy could actually be that base load. The footprint would be 40 to 60 acres, not 195,000 acres of pristine ocean environment. And it's so utterly safe in the way they've designed it that it's like a 1 in 6 billion chance of a fuel incident. It's crazy. Why aren't we really doing that?
I don't know. And it has a smaller carbon footprint than solar or wind.
That's right.
And the whole life cycle of the manufacturing of the plant and the equipment and the operation, it has a smaller carbon footprint.
Yeah.
It really makes no sense. There's a lot of emotional resistance around nuclear. But I think since you and I talked, actually when we talked before, the federal government has come out and they're revamping the regulations to streamline the development of nuclear power plants.
Yep.
In Washington State, a very liberal governor, Jay Inslee, supports nuclear energy.
Yeah.
He gets that he's not going to get his clean energy solution without it. And you're not going to, there's wind and solar don't provide what's called the baseline energy load. When the wind ain't blowing and the sun ain't shining, you still need
Still got
electricity.
power. Yeah.
So, and what happens is when the wind is blowing and the sun's shining, you're producing more electricity than you can consume sometimes.
Yeah.
So they're talking, well, we'll build these massive battery packs. Those battery packs, you got to go mine for all those rare earth minerals. And we're doing it in countries that are paying slave wages and have no environmental controls. And so, but yet we think of that as environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
So
well, now there's some good news at the federal level. There was a bipartisan, bicameral nuclear energy reform package that I believe has been signed into law. It was the Advanced Nuclear Deployment Act.
Yep, you got it.
That's the name. I actually met Richard Hudson. He was visiting Eugene because he's the NRCC chair, which is the group trying to get more Republicans elected nationally. And he came and visited. And that has morphed into being a part of the Fire Grants and Safety Act of 2023, which is supposed to make it easier to adopt these small nuclear reactors and micronuclear reactors that are the new technology that's extremely safe. And then I believe it's also rekindling the ability of us to produce the fuel ourselves and also more effectively handle the waste so that it gets reprocessed, it doesn't last as long as far as like radioactivity, easier to store in the meantime, and even generates more electricity from the waste. Yeah. And this is just opening that door. And the question is, will Oregon walk through it at some point? I know you've been working on that.
Yeah, I'll be introducing a bill again, and I'm sure I'll have some actually bipartisan support for it, whether it will be public bipartisan support or not. I'm also exploring, trying to get in touch with the folks up in Washington State. I'd like to set up an energy caucus, specifically looking at nuclear energy and some of these other energy options to make Oregon energy independent. Oregon could be energy independent today.
Yeah.
We could have low cost, plentiful, reliable energy if we had the will to do it. And right now we don't have the will to do it. But
well, and it does seem like there's a change in how the public may start seeing this issue.
I think there is,
which is the other thing, right? Because you have to take that to the ballot initiative level to get it reversed. It's in the Oregon Constitution, is that right?
It's in the Constitution that there has to be a permanent storage facility for the waste before Oregon will allow nuclear power. And so our bill would refer it to the voters to repeal that. And I want people to remember, if you're scared of nuclear energy, remember there's a nuclear power plant in Corvallis. It's a research plant, small. Yep. It's been running there for decades. It's right there in Oregon, right next to a metropolitan area. And it's been running fine and safe for decades. So people forget that. But we're going to continue to bring it back. And I know that there's growing support for it. So
well, and I think, isn't it true also that the fuel supply, we've been, everybody says, well, we got to stop relying on Russia for oil. Well, actually, how about if we stop relying on them for uranium?
Because we have plenty of our own uranium, but I think we ship a lot of it overseas right now.
Yeah.
The U.S. has plenty of uranium, my understanding anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when it comes to waste, there's been innovation, some in the works for decades. I know that France, for instance, just reprocesses it and generates energy from it as opposed to just storing it. And even the current storage methods have improved dramatically. The dry storage on site, the ability to store it safely. So that thing about Yucca Mountain being an absolute necessity, has declined greatly in significance, hasn't it? And now I believe the latest thing I saw is that they are prepared to essentially recycle the nuclear waste that they generate.
You're exactly right. The waste that we have um, can be recycled, and it's a decision we've made not to, because if you start recycling the waste, you the the waste that's produced is radically less, but it's more concentrated and it could be used for nuclear weapons.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's a matter of controlling and regulating that waste. But we could reuse a lot of the stuff that's been stored in these dry storage containers, is my understanding.
yeah.
Um, so we have a tremendous supply of energy in nuclear, and the cost of nuclear too. There's some debate over, well, how much does it really cost? If you look at the total life cycle of a plant and everything, it's in the ballpark with solar and wind. Where it does get out of whack is when you have really high inflation because the cost of money. It takes a huge upfront investment.
It does, yeah.
And so that's where the math gets a little wonky. But in normal economies, nuclear is very attractive economically. Too.
Well, part of it's time and government bureaucracy and regulation too.
Well, right.
Lawsuits.
If you
right?
streamline that, you standardize the design, you can build a plant in a few years instead of 2 decades. That brings the cost of that money way down. It makes it much more attractive for investors and for governments to put these things in place. It makes so much sense that it's going to happen.
Well, and that's what NuScale's done. As I recall, they said you can go from, I think we want to do this, to having an operating plant potentially in 36 months. And that can take a decade, as much as 2 decades to go from, I think we want to do this, to the older style nuclear plants.
Yeah.
Big operations that always had to be located near large bodies of water and have all these safeguards. But that's 1950s and 60s technology, and NuScale is 21st century technology, which requires far less in terms of water and so on. All these things this is innovation, right?
It is. And people also need to think about, well, if we were going to compare a nuclear plant with solar panels, you're going to have solar panels scattered all over. You got to have small substations. You got to connect them to a grid. That means you got to run wire all over the place to connect all this highly distributed energy source. We could build a nuclear plant at that coal plant, which we dismantled, which already has the power infrastructure to get on the grid. We don't have to, scatter these across farmland, run more power lines through our forests. We don't have to do that. We could repurpose this existing facility with nuclear, save money, save time, less impact on the environment. Yeah. I love having this conversation. It unfortunately gets bogged down with a lot of emotion and nonsense when on the other side when we present it.
Yeah, that is one of the issues for sure. And meanwhile, educating the public is actually something that the media's got to start becoming part of too. Because look, I mean, this is the Darwin test for societies: is can they actually figure these things out and do the right thing, rather than just respond to scare tactics over here and the sky is falling over there, and blank checks for giant disbursements that actually don't produce the results, and harm the environment. And I know that people like to talk about, well, nuclear energy is bad for the environment. Well, we just wrap that issue up with what we just talked about.
It's not. It's not. Demonstrate that. Prove it, because it's
Yeah,
not.
exactly. Even the accidents that have happened have resulted in uh, a, a very, very small number of people that have experienced ill health effects at all.
Yeah.
And that's something that gets lost in all of this.
It has a very impressive safety record.
Yeah.
It really does. So,
Yeah, the
and
TV ads will show nuclear bombs going off and people with their skin falling off. They'll probably do all that crazy stuff and make
yeah,
you think, but we have to actually pass that test and be smarter than the
right.
propaganda. That's why our society is, one where we have a say in how it's run, or should have a say, is that we can also make the right decision once we get the information.
Yeah.
So, and that's what you did here today. And I really appreciate it. There was one other thing I wanted to draw
Yeah.
people's attention to that you posted about. It was the 10 Oregon wildfire factoid updates. And I found it very helpful. It's good information and it is very informative. And I wanted to draw people's attention to it. What would be the bottom line that you'd want people to know from this information, given that this is actually one of the biggest issue at this time of year in Oregon? And the one factoid I know about is that we've had a record number of acres burned since they started tracking how many acres got burned.
We have, and I do want to thank Jacob Vandiver, who I work with in the House Republican office.
He's a good guy. Absolutely.
He's a great guy, and he puts these notes together for us. And so I've had the opportunity to cut and paste those and put them into a newsletter. But yeah, I think it's a record for acres burned. Not all of that is timberland. Some of that's grassland, which it puts out a lot of smoke, but it's probably okay for the grassland. It'll quickly recover.
Yeah.
I actually don't know what the breakdown is on that. But I think the big takeaway here is our forests are dry, and we're going to continue to have forest fires unless we decide to actively manage our forests.
Yeah.
And if we don't actively manage our forests, and at this point, aggressively actively manage our forests, we're going to continue to have this destruction year after year. And you can build all the car chargers you want. You can jack the utility rates up 18%, put all these mandates in place. It's not going to stop the forest from burning. It's not going to stop it. So the way we need to is look at how do we manage these forests to prevent these fires. And amazingly, you can do that and create jobs, create revenue for your schools, in your counties, in your rural areas, and have beautiful forests. It's amazing. You can get all of those things together.
All of the above is achievable.
All of the above. It just takes the will. Just takes Oregon will to make it happen.
So let me just display this real quick. One of our friends out on the coast who's very familiar with with this issue posted this recently, and I found it fascinating. Let me see if I can show it. It should be possible to see that. And this is the carbon footprint brought to you by 50 years of, and of course, the Sierra Club, Tree Huggers, U.S. Forest Service Mismanagement, and out of control federal government. Because as we know, the majority of Oregon actually is federal land, and therefore under the management of the federal, or as somebody calls it, the not Oregon part of Oregon, where we have no control over it. And it shows what a managed forest looks like before a fire and then after a fire, and then the unmanaged forest before and after. And that's telling, isn't it?
It is telling. And it is so frustrating for me as someone who I lived in a rural area all my life. I fought fire for a couple summers to raise money for college. I know a lot of foresters. Everybody knows that a managed forest will survive a fire, even if the weather's drier. That's why we have the Forest Service, frankly.
Yeah.
So this is so frustrating to know we can do better. We can do so much better, that we don't have to live with this. And are we really accomplishing our goals? Are we creating an environment that's better for the animals we're trying to save? No. Are we improving our carbon footprint? No, not if we let them burn every summer.
Right.
So there's so many reasons to get back to really actively managing our forest. I think it will probably take federal action to revamp the Endangered Species Act in order to make that happen, because as we've talked about before, we're coming to some nonsense conclusions. I think we've talked about it where the spotted owl continues to be in decline even after locking up all our forests for 30 years. They finally decided, well, you know why it's declining is because there's another owl that's an apex predator, the barred owl.
Yeah.
So we're going to hire a bunch of hunters to go out and kill 500,000 barred owls.
Yeah, that's good.
It makes no sense.
Yeah. So, and that's species management. It would be better if we did proper forest management, because as I understand it, one of the things that is now threatening the fate of the spotted owl and destroying its habitat are these fires. That the fires themselves are actually, and I saw pictures of 400 to 500 head of cattle that were burned alive in Eastern Oregon, and the person who sent those said it was just horrific. It was just like this massive waste, the slaughter of these animals because of just out of control fires, and also the wildlife. All this wildlife that we say we want to preserve, they're just getting barbecued by these fires and losing the habitat.
Yep.
It's crazy.
It's unbelievable.
Well, thank you once again for bringing. See what I tell everybody? He knows all of this stuff, and we can go to one person and talk about like the 5 most significant things going on in this state and shaping our future. And you aren't just knowledgeable about it, but you're out there trying to do something about it, as well as informing people. And I know everybody really appreciates that.
Well, thanks, Kevin, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak with you. I always enjoy these conversations. Hey, I'll make a note. We need to talk about ballot measure 116.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And I've got to go. So I don't have time to even touch on it right now, but that's another one that voters need to be aware of.
Well, let's do that on a follow-up here, because I think these are going to be on the ballot this fall, and it's going to be kind of a rolling effort to inform everybody of that. And I'm pretty sure some other issues are going to start to emerge here in the coming weeks too.
They will. Yeah. Lots of stuff to talk about.
And if they want more information about you and to follow you on social media, to your website.
You go to eddeal.com, EDDIEHL.com. You can follow me there, sign up for my newsletter. If you're so inclined, donate to me. I have a campaign to run. And you can also find links to all my social media. So I try and stay pretty active on X, formerly Twitter, and Facebook, to just keep people informed of what's going on.
And as I recall, your X or Twitter account is it The Real Deal? Is it?
Yes, real_Ed Deal.
Real_Ed Deal. There we go. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Ed, for joining us here, and good luck with everything else. And we look forward to the next time we get to have you on.